much more human and allows us to just, see reactions and connect with you differently. Given that this is all about helping people connect and be their best selves, presenting that is really, a great protocol for these meetings. So thank you for those who are in a position where you can put your videos on. I want to start, first of all, Greg, by thanking you for carrying the last couple of weeks of the webinars. Those of you who are regulars on the call know that I've been away for the last 2 weeks. Susie and I went up to one of the islands on the Barrier Reef and had a fantastic week up there. And then we went down to the Gold Coast and had a week at Burleigh Heads. And oh my God, I can't remember the last time I had like 2 weeks of no work, none. And it was just, it was fantastic. We had the best time and just great weather for probably 80% of it. We, as you might have heard, Australia, or the east coast of Australia, has had the worst floods in 100 years in the last couple of days. So it's been pretty heavy duty, but didn't interfere so much with our break. And I've just had the best time. So, one of my regular commitments is to do this webinar every Wednesday/Thursday. And Greg kindly covered for me. And, when you can do that and have total confidence in the person that's taking things on, it's just a very, it's a great gift that you give to me and to everyone else, Greg. So thank you for stepping in. To those of you who are new to the call, just to give you a little bit of context, this is actually webinar 49 that we've started. In fact, between this week and next week, March 27, so in a couple of days, is 1 year since we started doing these webinars. And the only reason that we're not at, week 52 right now is because we had a break over Christmas. But this is something that we started a year ago, in a couple of days, it's a year ago, as a way of just helping people navigate through the uncertainty that COVID looked like it was going to bring to everyone. And clearly that was a very polarizing experience. Some people haven't been adversely affected much at all, and for others it's been devastating. So, we started it temporarily, but it was so well received and so valuable, for me included, that we've just kept going with them every week. We've changed the formats up a little bit, but these are a free webinar that we put on every week at this same time as a way of helping people understand more about themselves and their IDs and how to operate their lives more in stride and true to themselves, so that no matter what happens, you can do that at your very, very best. And this class today is what we call a master class, because one of the things that came out of the evolution of this program was that it's all well and good to do this for like a public community and teach various elements of ID, but there are certain people that want to do a deeper dive and understand some of the nuances and really get, to develop a finesse around their capabilities with ID. And so this masterclass is on every couple of weeks, like the webinars every week, but we just changed the format. And we have an unfinished and ongoing topic, which is around mental wellness. It's something that's received a lot more publicity in the last year, as people have worked more and more, with the challenges, not just of COVID, but of what COVID has presented in their families and in their relationships and in themselves. And it's whilst it's been around for a long time, it's only maybe getting now the visibility that it needs, and people are realizing how pervasive it is in the community. So we believe there's a lot that is linked to your ID, and we're just going through a very open, authentic conversation with the members of this community each week to better understand how mental wellness and illness connects to ID. Like, are there certain correlations, and ultimately are there certain strategies that in sharing them, we can get to a point where, people can, even if they have some type of exposure to mental illness, they can use the strategies associated with their ID to get back in stride as quickly and as effectively as possible. So that's what we're going to be covering today. But we always start with a protocol around what we call the peak performance indicator. And this is you being a way of looking at, are you at your very best? So I'm going to share a screen. Let me just call that up so you can see it here. Okay. Can you see the peak performance indicator slide? Okay, great. So this is representing, the green arrow here represents you being in stride. So the very best version of yourself occurs when you are being true to your ID, when you are, whatever your numbers are, when you're operating true to that, that's when you shine and are at your best. Some people talk about being in flow or in the zone. We use the term being in stride. And when you are true to your ID, which is the predisposition, like our natural instinct is to operate this way, but there are forces in life that pull us off track, and not always for the wrong reasons. Like when you think about your parents tried to raise you to do things that they thought was best for you, but maybe it was biased towards their way of doing things and didn't really resonate as well with you. Teachers and employers and even your spouse and children and people around you, they can love you to death, but it doesn't mean that their expectations are aligned with your best way of doing things. And so for a lot of people, they tend to live their life initially trying to please the expectations of others. And as they get more into adulthood and get more aware, more self-aware, they realize that, you know what, there's a way that's different that works better for me. And so through ID, we try and help people get to that place as fast as possible. And not only do you then get all the things at the top of that chart around your very best performance and being fulfilled and great confidence and energy and health, but you also avoid the things on the horizontal axis here, which is what happens when you get pulled out of stride. And as you can see there, physical injury and illness, and then ultimately health issues are what happen when you get pulled more and more out of stride. And that's where the mental illness area can fit as well. There are a number of symptoms that people experience or that are exacerbated when people are pulled more out of stride. So a little exercise we do, and we suggest you do this on a daily basis, is to just think about, okay, in the way I'm shaping up today, or the way I'm going into this meeting, or the way I'm coming home from work, when I put that key in the door, who am I? Am I on this green arrow at my very best, presenting the best version of myself, or am I somewhere out of stride? And if you're out of stride, what can you do to get quickly back in stride with your ID? So our question is, on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is you right on the center line here, and a 1 out of 10 is right out to the right or right out to the left, what's the number that comes up for you today? And you might just want to quickly put that in the chat over on the, if you look at the chat there, you can just quickly sort of put a number down as to where you would say you are. And obviously a 10 or a 9 is a really high score of you being in stride and feeling like, this is a great day, not just in terms of the sunshine or what you've got on, but the way you're presenting yourself. And if you are a 2 or a 3 or a 4, it means that you can be very frustrated, not even wanting to get into today. It's one of those things that the sooner today's over, the better it is. So you can see there's some pretty decent scores here. Jordan, thank you for sharing yours, the 6. You don't have to share, but it's just good for the group to see where you might be at. And what I would say to you is the best place to be is 8, 9, or 10. And I say that from the point of view of the shadow that you cast. It's not just about your own personal effectiveness. It's also about the influence you have on other people around you. And so when you come from a place of, say, 5, 6, 7, whilst the way we've been raised is that 7 is not a bad score, 7 doesn't really cast a shadow. 7 means you're typically doing a job. I'm getting it done. It's a job. I get it done. I don't think about it. It's not whether it makes me happy or sad. I just do it and I get a wage for it. That's it. But people who are 9s and 10s, they are like beaming with excitement, with enthusiasm, with passion, with confidence to bring the best version of themselves. And so often, in addition to the job or the task they're doing, they have this additional effect on other people, just quite from like an osmosis point of view, because of the energy they cast. And equally, if you are a 2, 3, or 4, you might be casting a really negative energy that, you're complaining or whinging, being a victim about something, and that can be quite suppressing to other people around you as well. So when you think about the roles we all play, we're all in leadership positions in terms of belonging to communities where we either directly or indirectly influence others. Then we owe it to them, let alone ourselves, to think about how we can show up as the very best version of ourselves, no matter what's on. Now, does anyone have any comment about their score today? There's some high scores here, and just maybe what you're experiencing or what you've done to get to that particular score. So it's not, when people are, 9s and 10s, especially, it's not coincidence, normally because they've applied some type of strategy or intention to get to that place. Has anyone got anything they'd like to share?
I always have something to share, Paul.
Thanks, Judy. Well, you're at 10, so you're very welcome to share.
I have been doing exactly what I wanted to be doing all day. I have been with great people, making a difference in people's lives, sharing my wisdom and expertise. I gave a talk for a Kiwanis Club at noon today by Zoom on my favorite topic of asking questions. And that was wonderful. And I was on a seminar this morning where I was learning, and with a wonderful client this afternoon. And here I am with my family from Australia. So everything's cool in my world.
And for those, thank you, Judy. And for those new to ID, when you look at Judy's ID and you see the numbers there next to her name, the 7 incomplete is her strongest drive. So when she's able to operate according to the plan that she had for the day and feel like she's ticking boxes of everything that she had lined up is actually going according to plan, and she's getting to complete things as planned, that's really fulfilling. And in Judy's case, you know, when a completer is on a roll, and you've been at a score like this now for quite some time, Judy, you know, it's the momentum of that carries through from day to day, unless something really quite traumatic, you know, gets in the way. But even then, you know, there are strategies that as you become more and more self-aware, there are things you can then do to meet even the toughest challenges head on and from a place of being in stride. Thanks, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Or maybe have a question about this model or about their score? Because at the end of the day, this is the essence of ID. You know, life is going to pull you off track. Knowing ID doesn't make you immune to life's challenges. The people who do life best, that's why they say know thyself, and to thine own self be true, and self-awareness being one of the, if not the most fundamental and important leadership ingredient. It's because it's not about finding the magical round hole for your peg, you know, that the niche for your knack. That's not the essence. I mean, if you can get close to that, that's great. But so many people who do well, they might be in a great position where they're doing something that they're loving, but they still have all sorts of challenges that pull them out of stride. But it's about how you get back in stride quickly and don't go too far off track in the first place.
Yeah, I can add to that, Greg, at least Paul. Yeah, I injured my back about 6 weeks ago. And anyway, so I had the pain not caused by being out of stride, but just because I had a pain in the back. And there's something I find about a use authenticate, that you get this wounded lion effect. You know, the wounded lion, you prod a wounded lion and the reaction is always a bit over the top, you know. So I got some good advice from physios, etc., which was great because that gave me an object to fix it. And then I compared myself to other people who had bigger problems than me, and that sort of toned the wounded lion side down a bit, you know. Anyway, that's my input.
That's really good, Doug. And, you know, perspective is a great antidote, and especially for verifiers. You know, that's, I've often told the story, my son, when he was 6, was diagnosed with leukemia, or a form of leukemia. And in the hospital we were in, it was, well, it's not a very nice thing to be diagnosed with, but it was like, because it was a smaller hospital, he was the worst in the world, you know, and he got sent, then transported by ambulance to a main hospital in Sydney for proper treatment afterwards. And in that hospital, there were kids with so many even worse illnesses. And within 30 minutes of being in that hospital, when we got to see what these other kids and families were dealing with, our perspective changed from, you know, woe is us to, man, we're lucky. We're lucky that this is all it is, you know. And it was interesting to me, and a great life lesson, that although nothing had changed in Mitchell, because our perspective changed, our whole approach to how we supported him then changed as well. So perspective is everything, and especially for verifiers.
Yeah.
Can I add something, Paul?
Sure.
From a I've had an understanding from talking with Ian that one of my traits as a all down then up is idealism. And so one of the things that and this ability or this it could be pro and con of not just seeing and hearing something but really feeling it. So if I spend too much time watching the news or scrolling social media, my spirit just gets completely decimated and I get really, really sad. And if I'm in that space, then I'm no good to anyone. One of the things with, as I understand with the Use Improvise, I really need to be around positive, upbeat people, or I will just like fade like a little leaf in the corner. So I'm become more and more conscious of that. I need to remove myself from situations so that I can then regain my own equilibrium or get back in stride. And I've really become more aware of that. Especially when I was reading. Now I understand when COVID was first hitting and I was like, eating up the news while I was just almost like lost the plot. And that's why. So that's a really strong thing for me.
Well, so you're sharing some great things there, Angela. I would add to you, it's not just that you shrink as an improviser. Positive energy is like a source of oxygen. So when you don't have positive, and more the point, you have negative energy, because they're actually different things. Like you can have, it's one thing to have a lack of positive energy, but to actually be surrounded by negative energy is just like poison. It's like kryptonite for Superman, so it becomes paralyzing. It's not just that you might shrink and not be as social or not feel as, into life. You actually get to the point where it can be paralyzing and you don't want to do anything.
Yeah. I want to stay in bed.
So I would say to you that the two things are important. One is to seek out positivity. So it's not just people. It will be more people if you are an extroverted type of person, but just whatever is positive for you. It might be the clothes you're wearing, the color of the room, the way you've organized your desk, who you're talking to, whatever, the font you use when you're typing emails. I mean, whatever you regard as positive energy, all of those things line up and can be a source of oxygen for you. And equally, if you're using a font that is too small or somehow in your mind negative, it may not be negative to anyone else, or the way the colors of your office or your clothes or the car you drive, or whatever it is that in your mind goes, that's negative, you want to look at how you can change that, and the improvisers who get really intentional about that, having, like you, learned that about themselves, and then go, okay, so what are my sources of negative energy? How do I change that? What can I get that's more positive energy? How do I turn that up? They're the people that really, with an idea like yours, really present the best version of themselves.
My goodness, that's so funny. I'd never thought of it like that. You've just like opened this whole new like attic in my brain. Even last comment, and then I'll be quiet. Putting on this lipstick, which is a really bright, you can't see it a lot, so I'm in a little bit of shadow, this really bright coral lipstick. Literally, when I put it on, I feel happier. So there you go. Absolutely proves it.
Same for me.
Thank you. That was brilliant.
Can I just add in here, it's Gail, similar ID 4229 to you, Angela. What I do is I'm a newsaholic. I can't stop watching it, but I don't watch it. I listen. I half hear it, and I don't let myself get dragged down into all the negative. It's just that's going on out there, and I'm doing what I'm doing here. And I've stopped getting that awful, oh, I can't watch this. Some things that does happen if they're really bad detective shows, but and I'm there and I'm about to be murdered, even though I know I'm watching it on TV. But with the news, I've just actually learned to let it wash over me. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, now I get why it is that I cannot watch the TV programs that my husband watches. I physically can't watch them. Now I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Angela and Judy. I mean, it just brings to life the whole, essence of ID, that there is a way for all of us to do things when we're at our best, but it doesn't mean that life allows that automatically every time. And until we get quite proactive and intentional about lining things up so that they fit our design, but not in a way that compromises other people. It doesn't mean that if you want to be planful, everyone else around you has to be planful, or if you want to be a last minute person or doing things with a lot of adrenaline, everyone around you needs to do that. the next level of learning ID is how to meet your needs while also meeting the needs of other people, you know. So there are people, for example, in a marriage, one of them likes spontaneity and flexibility, and their partner wants things to be really organized. They can jive together really well. So the organizer might say, well, let me organize the holiday or the weekend, and they just don't tell their partner about it. And whilst if you didn't understand ID, that might feel like it was, you know, unfair or something like that. I mean, when a couple understand this about themselves, they actually have fun with it and they joke about it. And the very thing that might have been a source of aggravation, in fact, I only had someone yesterday say to me, you know, I know I don't know if this would have changed things, but I wish I had this in my marriage, because they're now actually going through a breakdown, and they're like, you know, it probably wouldn't have saved things, but boy, it would have changed a lot, you know, to have that level of awareness. Okay, we might move along, guys, onto the main topic today for our masterclass, which is on mental wellness. And Greg, I'm not sure, did you cover some discussion on mental wellness last week as well? I want to just build off where you left.
Well, yeah, a lot. And one of the model of it was that there's a lot of physiological, neurobiological, endocrinology research showing that what's going on in the midbrain is where the decision maker is going, oh my God, or it's going, oh boy, right? It's deciding whether it's a threat or an opportunity. And if you haven't got a way to reframe it, all the things we've been talking about this morning so far is about taking that same situation, but looking at it with a different perspective. But you need your cortex to do that, to get a different perspective. You need to be able to out of the emotion. So we talked about the idea of balancing between really being true to me, so I am feeling comfortable in me to be able to go get creative, as opposed to trying to fit in with everybody else where I'm out of stride. And that balance between fitting in as the tribe and looking after me, there's the constant back and forth on that. And we're suggesting that mental health was a result of two possibilities. I'm not right for me, but I'm trying to fit in, so it's still not right. Or I'm fitting in, but I'm not right. But I'm okay, and I'm just bailing the tribe, right? So I'm actually now, being isolated. So my point is, when we can find a way of reframing, that comes from getting bigger than the situation or getting outside it, finding someone an other way to look at it. And that shift, that perspective, as it's like Angela's face changed, like, oh, wow, just same situation, different perspective, same lipstick. And, so what we're going for ID is we have a gift that a lot of people don't have, is to go, well, what part of me is missing? And we're saying putting me back in stride, getting me. And when that's there, now biologically, we move to the cortex. Now we get creative.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Greg. There's, a lot of discussion we've been having lately with people is that if you're going to, around resilience, because I think people, just a couple of days ago, someone was saying, we want to talk about resilience, and it's linked with mental wellness and so on, mental illness and then wellness. But so much of that is you tackle everything best if you're coming from a place of being in stride and taking care of yourself. Even that phrase of put your own oxygen mask on first, we do that when we think about that in an aeroplane, but really in life. So it's so easy for us to think, oh, we've got to do the right thing by other people first and do that from a place of compromising our needs. But you actually do it best when you look after your needs first and present all that you have to offer, not only for the benefit of others, but particularly from a mental wellness point of view. It's very pervasive. And when we're talking about a statistic that's basically 1 in 4, and so when you think of a workplace with, I'm thinking of some of our clients who've got, 50, 60, 70,000 people, you've got like a mass issue. You look at even in our community with ID, just because we understand ID, even on this call, that means there are a bunch of people on this call, maybe half a dozen people, who are either themselves or in their direct families, there are people who are enduring some type of mental illness, and so whether this helps you directly for yourself or whether it's something you can help people that you love and care about in your own circle, this is a really significant thing. Like if you did nothing more than help people get more in stride and present the best version of themselves, I mean, what else is there in life to do than that? You know, that really is the essence of it. So I might just, thanks, Greg. I'm going to just throw up a slide to provoke some conversation. Let me call it up here. So I just thought I'd throw up some examples of categories of disorders, so that we can maybe just, if people are comfortable enough to flag their own experience of these, either personally or someone that you know in your own circle, you know, that might have experienced one or more of the items in the blue, and then just to talk it through in terms of, you know, the four things down the bottom, so we can just see either connections to ID or based on your ID, how you then might best deal with that. Because remember, however you do it, someone might be on this call with a similar, or listening later with a similar ID, and this could be, you know, a game changer for them. A little bit like what happened before when I was talking about something and Angela resonated with it. You know, that happens all the time with ID. Has anyone got experience with any, either, particularly if you're willing to share at a personal, direct level, where you've maybe experienced something here and can see a connection with your ID, and, you know, maybe how you've subsequently dealt with it? By the way, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just probably what I would call the main types of disorders that occur, particularly the ones in bold. And I put the ones in bold because in the workplace, they're probably the ones that come up more, you know, as more common. There are others that occur, but are not as common for people. So I just thought we might have more experience with the ones that are bolded.
I could speak about this a little bit, Paul, because I've been having issues with losing my energy since 2012, every year. And I know a lot more now about that whole experience than I did before, but I experienced anxiety, phobias, depression, on the list in the blue. Those were the things that, besides the physical things of not having any energy,
Yeah.
And I really feel so strongly now, because that's when I was a caregiver for my former husband, Joe. And I was constantly interrupted by his need for attention, and I couldn't complete things. I didn't have enough time for myself. And so I can see the direct correlation to my not being able to be in stride with my ID. And,
Well, that's right. As you then get back to a place of, you know, having your plan and being able to tick those boxes, Judy. So
yeah.
you've noticed then a significant shift. Have those, whatever those disorders were, what's happened to them? Have they disappeared altogether? Have they just reduced?
They're gone. They're gone. Yes. And the thing that I'm noticing now, because since the first of the year, especially, you know, as I've had more energy and been able to complete more things, the momentum that you spoke about earlier, I now have things more organized, and when I want something, I know exactly where it is. I know where to find it. There's no stress. And every single day I'm going, oh my God, this is so wonderful. It's just such a world of difference. And I don't know what I would have or could have done differently during the time that Joe was alive. However, I know now that it had a huge impact on both my physical and mental health.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Laura, we can't hear you, Laura. It doesn't say you're on mute, but I just can't hear you. Maybe while you try and fix that, Laura, might hear from someone else. I'm not sure why we can't hear you.
Her cat did some magic mute button on her laptop, maybe.
All right. Has someone else got something they want to share around, or even a question around it?
Actually, Paul, I forgot what we finished up with last week with that green box you've got down there.
Yep.
And the goal was to then start looking at particular drives. Maybe this is a bit of a call for people to call out that they have bipolar depression with an anxiety disorder and dementia. So it's pretty big call. But what this does was looking at each drive and going, well, does each drive, is the same stressor, the same situation going to be reacting to by people the same way? And I'm saying, no, the drives will take different things that'll really set them off. And so I was hoping to go through somebody's drives and say, what sorts of things will be the ones that would lead you out of stride? And what do you call that? So can you recognize it? And then the third one is, what does it actually physically, literally do to you? What are your sort of reactions to it? And then what he found, it comes back. And I'm thinking that's particular for every drive combo. I think that it's not just per drive, but our complete ID, and that we might be able to get a sense of, oh, that feeling. Oh, I know what's going on now. Oh, this is what I do. That was kind of where we left it last week now.
Okay.
Hey, this is Donzel. I'd be willing to kind of go through the exercise.
Right.
Yeah, so I can say back in college, so about over 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I think for me, it was more along the lines of, it was a difficult time in my life where I didn't realize where I didn't have a co-op or intern set up. So I was going to graduate, but I didn't really know what my next step as far as job was going to be. I was a former football college player, so I didn't really necessarily have the resources or things to, I didn't have the outlets to be able to put my frustrations out on someone in a sense, right? I couldn't just go around knocking people down on the street and, I'll probably be in jail for that. But in football, it's okay. So I would say that, during that time, there were a lot of stressors where I just didn't know. And then I was, 20 something. So that next chapter or milestone in life where I had friends and family that were getting married and, taking that next step, it was just a lot of questions for me. So I knew I needed to get help, but I just didn't know what that meant. I mean, mental health was not, it was, and I think in a lot of ways it still is, it was kind of shunned. And, especially being a football player, it was like, hey, you're supposed to be tough. And so, unpacking that, I would say during that time it was bipolar. What caused it for me was just all the variant categories of stress. How did I define it and recognize the symptoms? I just knew I needed help because I didn't know this terminology now, but I wasn't in stride to my authentic self. I was not happy. I think I'm just a natural, joyous person. And then the impact it had on me was where people recognized it, and I was just I became a loner and just became more to myself. And so what got me back into balance, I would think it was a combination of things. So I went through the process of, the outpatient care and things of that sort. I admitted myself to a mental health facility, and I went through their program, and just being straight up honest, I came to faith. And so that was kind of my progression during that time, and how I navigated that. Now, I am a noob in regards to 4737 and how that relates and how we can tie those things together. I don't know how I really can do that. But
So Donzel, can I ask you, now that you look back on that time,
yeah.
do you in hindsight, do you feel like you did have bipolar as such, or was that just symptomatic? They were just a bunch of symptoms that you had that could be given a label at that time, but they were just symptomatic of what you're going through. And now that you know what you know, you wouldn't necessarily say you're bipolar. You just have new strategies for how to deal with frustration.
You hit the nail on the head, 100%. Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't know what I was going through, and I didn't have the tools, what you're talking about. I didn't have the tools to be able to manage it. And so there's going to be stressors in life. There's going to be life circumstances, but I just didn't know how to manage it, and I knew I needed some help. But now being equipped with, different tool sets like faith or the IDs, getting to your center. You come to understand that, hey, you're gonna get knocked on the butt, and you just dust yourself off and work back to center again. So, yep, you hit the nail on the head.
Well, it's a really important point, because if you think about, I've got you in a second, Jose. What's really important here is if you think about the way people get diagnosed, there are a number of symptoms. If you go to see some professional about, whether it's a psychologist or a doctor, they have a list of symptoms, and they basically say, have you got this? Have you got this? Have you got this? Have you got this? And if you tick enough boxes that are in that particular category, they go, well, therefore you have X, but doing that to someone, if you think about what happens next, everything from, you try and get life insurance, and the life insurance is going to say, have you ever been diagnosed with something like, say, bipolar? You can't turn around and say, well, yeah, it was 20 years ago, it was misdiagnosed, it wasn't really this, it was that, and that now either means you won't get the life insurance, or you get some type of significant premium on it, or an exclusion. You get first of all, the effect on your self-esteem. Like, there's a label inside your head now that you can never remove. It's like a scar that occurs that can never be removed. So whether it's bipolar, whether it's ADD in a young child, I had a guy yesterday ring me from the Netherlands, wanted some coaching because he'd been diagnosed with ADHD when he was a kid, has got some issues going on at work, and just started the conversations by saying, well, I'm an ADHD person, so maybe it's all into that. But now, having learned about ID, I'm interested to know if my ID can help somehow. But he owned the whole ADHD thing. He's a completer who wasn't able to plan and was always interrupted, etc. Everything was linked really to being that ID. And once we talked about some strategies to get back in stride, even then he was struggling to let go of the label, because it's a label that's been around for so long. So I think we have to be very, very careful. And I'm not saying that every label is incorrect and that no one has ADHD or no one has depression in a clinical, chemical, biochemical sense. I'm just saying there are a lot of people who are firstly incorrectly diagnosed, but even in a diagnosis, the strategies, instead of giving them medication, are there things we can give them around how they operate more in stride, to Greg's point earlier, tackling any challenge, whether it's a personal one or whether it's something from life that you tackle. You're going to do it best if you come from a place of being in stride. Just to finish off for you, Donzel, what I would say to you, if you go back to college, and this is something that would follow through in life, when people are saying to you as you finish college, so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What's your plan? You look at your ID now. Your ID is not a planning ID. Your ID is best reacting, so life dishes stuff up and you grab it. But so when people are saying, what are you going to do? That's almost a paralyzing type of question, because we're expected to, have an answer like, well, what I've been working towards through my whole degree is to be a dentist, doctor, scientist. But to just say, well, I'm waiting for something to dish up so I can react to it, sounds incredibly superficial. But actually, with your ID, that's what happens. So you can get on the front foot by just putting yourself into lots of adventures so that life throws things up. Like if you want to date somebody, you can either wait at home for the phone to call, or you can go out and start meeting people knowing that it's a numbers game, right? And there's a lot of people with your ID who have just started something so that it's a something. And in being in the something, people react to them because they like what they see. And next thing, the right opportunity comes up. But when you talk to so many people with your ID who are doing something they love now, and you say, how did you get to that place? It's a wonderful story to hear, because it's rarely a straight line. Normally it's, you know, well, something happened and then I met this person and this just popped up and I said yes. So just knowing that about yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong. That's just how you tick. You know, so hopefully that can help you now stay more, you know, not own that issue of bipolar from all those years ago. Now, Jose.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it was, and I do appreciate that. And I just say this last thing: it was a stigma for me for a very long time. Yeah. But you know, it's definitely a thing of the past, and it's something I didn't want to share ever. But you know, definitely am willing to do it now, and it, you know, if it frees other people up to do the same, you know.
What about even in a relationship, when you then met your wife, and you and I have talked previously, right? And you've got a beautiful marriage and so on now, but even then you meet someone, you think, do I or don't I share this? You know, what's the consequence of, and yet it's actually a nothing. It was just an issue of lack of self-awareness, but it can be at the point where even if she didn't understand things enough or felt somehow fragile, maybe you wouldn't even have the relationship you've got today. You know what I mean? That's how dangerous these things are.
So I suffer from a high degree of self-awareness, and I'm always analyzing situations with, what am I doing here? How do I work within this? And this was before ID came along, and I'd self-diagnosed as being bipolar, because I could see that I'd be super, super happy, really, really miserable, super happy, really miserable, but that was it. But because I had that high level of self-awareness, I don't have a stigma with accepting the fact that I've got mental illness of some kind, because things don't work. You know, I don't relate to some people. I can't talk to some people. And I said, well, obviously there's something there to be fixed. And it's just now that we're doing this and we're looking at this and we're talking ID that I go, oh, every time I went down into the depression, it's because I was completely out of stride because of the environment that I was in, but I wasn't able to recognize that. And every time that I was super happy and everything was going well, it was because everything was in stride with my ID. And, you know, I was solving problems and working miracles and organizing things and getting people to do stuff and seeing them smiling and going, yeah, world's great. And then I'd go back into the tea room and there's misery and depression and how dare you talk to me like that. And so if you go from these highs and lows, you've got to say, well, I must be bipolar. Yeah. Right. But I'm okay with that, because if I can recognize that there's a problem, I can start working to fix it. If I don't look at that, and if I don't deal with me first, how can I deal with anybody else?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel for you, Donzel. Well done.
Well, Jose, thank you for sharing. So what I would say to you is, it's not so much bipolar in the true sense of bipolar. It's not bipolar that you have. It's just a roller coaster. It's just like you're on the ride of life, you know, and there's the highs and the lows. True bipolar is really quite different to that. And as you learn, as you're doing now, you're learning about the connection between your ID and those highs and lows. You can start to be more proactive around shaping the environment so that it suits your ID. You know, when you think about your ID, you just have this almost a fanaticism around needing to know how things work. If you care about, you know, you want to pull it apart and understand how does the machinery work, whether it's the machinery of, you know, a physical thing or of the human body and the human mind and so on. You need to know how things work. And so it's not you to just accept an emotion. You would want to understand how it works and why is it so, basically, you know, like Professor Julia Sumner Miller at that time, why is it so? That is like the 7723 mindset. But as you explore it and you learn it, and you go, oh, I get it. I was down when the things were down and I was up when the things were up. how do I now change it so instead of being reactive, I can be proactive, which your ID can do. And then you will still be, you want highs and lows because that's life. You want to be emotional. You don't just want to be like a flat line. But at least now you can do it from a place of there's nothing wrong with me, you know what's going on. And when you understand it, just the understanding for someone with your ID gives you an inner peace.
Paul, I'd like to comment on these two guys because of the authenticate in there. And one of the things I think we do well, particularly Donzel, you're similar to my drive. I'm just extreme on a couple. And what we need to do is be useful, like that 8 of mine. You need that 7, and Jose's got it as well. Like we need to be doing something useful, not just for us, but for almost anyone. Even if we're out in a cafe and someone drops their napkin, we feel the need to go help pick it up for them, sort of thing, right? And if we have a sense of where am I going, what am I supposed to do, what you get too big with that picture, like what am I here for? I was a linebacker and now I'm this, that kind of thing, I don't know if you were a running back, sorry, mate, but yeah. And the thing is, I'm finding when Jose was talking about, I didn't get on with this person, then I did that. If we bring it down to the moment, what do I do? What's the best use of me in this moment? Don't get too big. What's the best use of me this day, this week? And then you add on your other, then your 3 and your 7, and where's the energy in that? And one of the tricks I'm using is when I have a drama or a problem, I go, what's this a solution to? What is this offer that I've got that if I twist it or look at it from a different perspective, I can use this sucker. So there's the use, right? And then looking for what it's a solution to means I have to get a bit creative, and I have to look at it from different ways. It just that one thinking also sends me up into my cortex where I'm having to solve a problem now. And it's not the problem of the issue. It's the problem of how can I use this issue? And when you guys were talking, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not bipolar. I just got a guy in the break room. That's difficult for me. Let's deal with that, So I think for us, if we can bring it down from cosmic, what am I here for, to what am I here for in the next half hour? Give that a shot and report back next week, son.
Thanks, Greg. So I want to address. Sorry, go, Laura. No, we can't hear you. Nope. Maybe if you dial in, Laura, like if you dial in by phone, I don't know, maybe you're coming in through the computer. Maybe if you dial in by one of the numbers in the link, in the invite, maybe that's a way of doing it. Okay. So, Greg, you asked an interesting question before around connection to actual, drives. So I want to just take an example of this. If you take something like depression, because that's a very common thing that people experience, I will tell you that I've found people with varying drives saying they either have been diagnosed or suffer from depression. So, okay. So if you think about improvisers, the improvised drive is a really emotional drive. It gets animated, it gets excited and passionate. So it will have its highest highs and its lowest lows. And there are people that when they have their lowest lows will say they suffer from depression. And especially if they're surrounded by a lot of negativity and a lack of positivity, then they feel like they're almost wallowing in this depressed place. But I've also heard of and experienced people who are avoid improvisers saying that they have depression as well. So you can have depression at either end of the scale. How it shows up is different. How you might deal with it is different. So depression for an avoid improviser, is just they're seriously, because they take everything really seriously and diligently. Maybe they're seriously frustrated or concerned or, annoyed and in a dark place. So take, for example, someone's died that was really close to them and they're grieving that loss and or something equivalent. They can be in a very dark and lonely and sad, and they might use the word depressed place, to the point where they have a lot of the symptoms that a doctor or a psychologist could then tick boxes and diagnose them with depression, but they're just in that seriously dark place, And one of the problems for avoid improvisers is they'll say, when I get into a place like that, I feel stuck. Now, whether it's a place of depression, I've even heard them say in like a marriage, because they committed to the marriage but they feel stuck in the marriage. They don't like it. They don't want to change it, but they don't know what to do about it. That's different, because everything they try to assess has risk attached to it. And it gets to a place where it's just less risky to almost stay with where they're at than try something to get out of the rut, you know? And the rut can be maybe a place of depression. So I don't know whether anyone relates to that and can share that, but I share that with you to say depression as an example, but I think it would be true of most mental illnesses. They're not peculiar to one direction of a drive. We can all experience the behavior or the symptoms, but for different reasons, and what we do about it will be different. It would be interesting to hear from some of you if you relate to what I'm sharing, either as avoid improvisers or improvisers, and you've experienced something like depression, to maybe speak to that, if you can relate. Still can't hear you, Laura. It's a real shame, because I bet you're bursting with something to share. I'm dying to know what it is. But anyway, if we could mime. Anyone, anything I want to share? Judy, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing about doctors and diagnosis and medication. When I had the low energy and I went to my Western medicine doctor and, you know, told him I just don't have any energy and etc. And he wanted to write a prescription for antidepressants. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I changed doctors and went to this place called the East West Clinic. And I thought, well, maybe if it was a combination of Eastern medicine, Western medicine, maybe she could help me. She wanted to do the same thing. And when I told her I wouldn't do that, she got very angry with me and told me it might be, you know, might take trying this and trying that, and trying something else. And in 1969, I took some antidepressants. And when I tried to get off of them, I could not get off. And my doctor would not give me any support. I had to devise my own plan to get off of them. And I promised myself then, no more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
it's a vicious thing that people, you know, they get in that, and it doesn't help. In many cases, it doesn't help.
it's a very tricky area, Judy, because, you know, to your point, there's a lot of people, it's generally an experimental process with these medications, and they don't work for everybody, let alone the fact that some people are misdiagnosed in the first place.
This is very valuable today. Extremely.
One of the things I would, you know, when I looked at a lot of those illnesses for myself, I feel very blessed that I just don't feel exposed to them, you know, and I think so much of it in my case comes down to, firstly, I was very fortunate to grow up in a loving, you know, what I would consider a very normal middle-class family. We did nothing extraordinary to me. We weren't that different to all the families around us. We were just a, you know, normal family, but there was good support and love, and we felt like we belonged and it was safe. So we were, and when I think today, how many people didn't have that? I mean, even at my time, but it wasn't evident at the time, you know, there was no abuse in our family, you know, which I thought was true of all families. I now know differently, you know, but I feel very fortunate to have not experienced that. And obviously this has been the focus of my life, you know, my adult life of, you know, self-awareness and that journey and learning strategies to be in stride. And I will say I've experienced a lot of, or not a lot, I've experienced several life challenging situations, whether it's to do with the, you know, significant health of my children, or whether it's marriage and relationship challenges, and then work challenges and resilience. But I've had, you know, a decent share of those things, but I've been able to, through knowing about ID, I've been able to dig deeper and find strategies to be able to, you know, not only get through them, but do them from a place of being really in stride and actually thriving on those situations. I still remember when my son was in hospital with leukemia and feeling like, what's wrong with me that I'm actually getting a buzz out of this? You know, like I totally got the seriousness of it at the time, but with my ID, the fact that we had problems to solve, I had to get really creative with how we would do it, had him to motivate and keep in stride. I was sort of doing my wife at the time was in hospital having another baby. So I was going actually from one hospital to another. And I remember being in the car, I still remember where I was driving thinking, I'm actually having a really good time doing all of this. What's wrong with me? Because I should be feeling really bad. But I never once thought we would lose my son. I always thought we'd have a way of, you know, we'd find a way somehow. But it was only for ID that I can say I didn't, you know, maybe feel really bad about myself, because I could sense, even if I didn't fully understand it, it had something to do with me being more in stride through all of the pressures and dynamics. But if I didn't know that, I would have felt incredibly guilty and like I wasn't a loving father and I wasn't emotionally connected to the seriousness of the situation and to the, you know, well-being of my child if I didn't understand that. But it was actually, and even when my dad was dying, my father was dying, the hero of my life, and we were actually having a great time with it. You know, I got the seriousness of dad dying, but I'm one of 6 children. We would sit around the table, and dad was he passed away at home, and we'd sit around the table just talking as a family and having the nicest time together. Glass of wine, lots of laughs and memory. And I thought, what a beautiful way to leave us. You know, he's leaving us all together, laughing, having a good time. What a beautiful memory. I hope I can do that for my children. And I'm like crying in 1 minute and then just ecstatic at the other, that this is the last memory my father's leaving us. And, you know, I found it interesting that with perspective and being in stride, even with challenging situations like that, there's still a way of doing it where you could, if someone grabbed you in that moment and said, what's your peak performance score today? Like right now, I probably would have said an 8 or a 9. And yet I understood it at the time of what was happening. You know, it's crazy, but it's only crazy because it's not the way we've been raised. But I've now, in sharing it publicly, found many other people relate to the same thing, but haven't felt that they could have a voice around it because they feel guilty about it, you know?
Paul, thank you for that. It's Gail. I just thought I'd comment as an improviser, because I probably, if I were at school nowadays, would be diagnosed with ADHD, because my capacity to concentrate for huge periods of time is quite minimal. Even when I'm watching TV, and I generally listen rather than watch, but I've got the TV on and I'm taking note of what it's saying. I'm often fiddling with my phone or playing solitaire on my iPad or doing something. And yet I'm enjoying the program. And Jeff says to me, aren't you watching? And I go, yes, but he says you're playing with your phone. And I go, yeah, I can do them both. And I'm sure that in a school environment today, I would have been told I had ADHD because of my concentrate. And yet I take it all in and I generally do okay. But I used to think, as I've said before, that I was going mad. I've never thought that I had depression or any of those things. But by the same token, I did have periods of thinking I was nuts because I wasn't like anyone else. And I think that that's one of the difficulties when you have these out there IDs, that you don't really, until you understand it, you're just so off the planet. And as I say, other people go, well, aren't you listening? And of course I'm listening, but I'm listening and doing and leveraging and all these other things that come into my life, because as a 4229, that's what I'm doing. No, Greg, I'm not, but I am doing something else. So I won't tell you what it is, but I cannot easily concentrate for 1 hour on one thing. So even if I'm listening to a webinar, I've got something else happening somewhere else. I might be writing some notes or random thoughts come into my brain, so I put them down somewhere. So, but as I say, I'm very sure. I wonder how many ADHD kids have, are high improvisers and actually ADHD is not valid. And I'm so sorry those poor kids have to take Ritalin to survive. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gail. I'm aware of the time. I think you're in pretty safe company on this call with people that need to be doing several things at the same time. But guys, thank you so much for being on the call today. I have to jump too. I'm booked on another call. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. In the meantime, stay in stride, make a difference to everybody, and always be the best version of who you are. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.
You too as well.